Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Davison. I am a third year Doctor of Occupational Therapy student here at West Virginia University, and I am completing my capstone, my doctoral capstone with the Hearts of Gold this semester. And as part of my capstone, I have created some learning modules for you all to kind of complete, between the eligibility survey and application phase, and then also after the application phase, while your application is under review. These modules intend to provide you with an overview of some important topics that are going to come up more than likely within the Hearts of Gold program, that you will get way more extensive knowledge on as move through the program, as you get if you get accepted. And so these are just really to kind of get you thinking about some of these crucial topics, and just kind of keep you engaged as I know you wait through the application process. And yeah, so what I want to preface is that each of these modules will have a short quiz after, that everyone will need to take. And it'll just be a few questions regarding the material that was in whatever module that was just covered. And it's just a way to, make sure you went through the module either through the slides on your own time or through this video I'm recording for you today. So let's go ahead and get started. This first one, or not first one, excuse me, this one currently is how to best prepare your home environment for a dog. So, we want to initially think of, why is it important to prep my home for a dog? Well, the home environment ultimately needs to be safe. It needs to not only be safe for you and your family, but it needs to be safe for a dog. They need to feel like they have a comfortable and safe place to come and rest, just like we humans do. And in prepping for a dog, it really helps minimize the stress for both you as the owner and for that dog coming in, because as humans, as humans transition through different phases of life, things can be nerve-wracking, just as a dog transitions into a new home. There's bound to be some nerves and some feelings of uneasiness with that transition. So what should I do in my home to help make it better for my dog? We initially want to keep it clean and safe. We want to have a good place for them to use the restroom and run around. We want to make sure the temperature in the house is comfortable, which I'll get to, the best temperature ranges here shortly. We want to have a devoted area that they can rest. We want to have appropriate bedding for them, and we really want to try to keep a household routine. So, keeping it clean and safe. We really initially want to make sure the hazards are eliminated in each room of the house. So, initially, some hazards that we might think of are sharp objects like knives, scissors, thumbtacks, nails, things like that. Or toxic food. We've all heard of dogs can't have X, Y, and Z food, really making sure that that's out of the way. Some things we might not think about though are toxic plants, and how some plants are very toxic for dogs to ingest. And then rugs. If you have any sort of hardwood floor or laminate floor or anything that's basically not carpet, rugs can very easily slide, causing a tripping hazard for the dog or for you. So, in either way, that's not good. We want to avoid clutter and make sure breakable objects are secure. We also really want to keep electrical cords hidden and organized, which is so important, because if electrical cord is being chewed on by a dog, they're trying to get in that little protective casing, they could get hurt themselves, the dog could, or it could be a major fire hazard. So we really want to keep those tucked away and kind of out of sight, out of mind. We want to make sure we're throwing away all of our garbage. We're not leaving that lay around. And we should ideally have a lid on our garbage can to keep the dogs out of it. But if we can't, we want to make sure it's kept away in a cabinet or closet somewhere. Same with medications. Medications should be kept away from reach. You want to keep them in a storage container that cannot be opened, ideally, or a container that is just, like I said, out of reach, just as you would with the trash. So, this is actually a slide with some photos from the Hearts of Gold Training Center here in Morgantown, West Virginia. This is part of their facility. They have an apartment style, house style, whichever you would call it, side of the building. And I took these photos because this is truly ideally what you want your house to look like. You want it to be super clean. You don't see any hazards in any of these pictures. No, again, cords, rugs, anything like that. Everything's put away very nicely in all of these rooms, organized. Plants, you can tell, like in the kitchen, is up on that countertop. There's one in the middle picture sitting on a cart that, you know, won't really be bothered. It's just, this is ideally what you want your home to look like: very clean, organized, and safe. All right, moving on to having a good place for them to go to the bathroom and run around. So I've kind of divided this slide into yard versus no yard. So if you have a yard, front or back or both, you want to make sure they are well maintained, making sure the grass is cut, all the weeds and shrubbery are pulled. You're picking up your dog's waste. You're not letting it dry out in the yard, or not leaving it out there for the dog or other animals to potentially eat. Having adequate space for them to run around, space so they're not running into a wall or a shed or other objects that could be laying in your yard. You just want to make sure it's maintained and has as much space as possible. If it is financially possible for you and your family, you also could consider a fence to really help provide them the best place possible. If you're going to go that route and install a fence, you want to make sure the height is appropriate and there are no gaps. This includes the bottom of the fence. You want to make sure it's very secure, and you want to really make sure the gate is able to latch and lock. So strangers aren't coming in out of your yard. Your dog's not trying to push open the gate, because I know they can learn how to. So just really making sure those things are instilled. If you don't have a yard, or you share yard space, like if you live in an apartment or townhome, you want to still make sure they have a place they can comfortably and safely use the restroom and run around in. So you can walk them down the street if there's a little green area. Utilize a shared yard if you have that available to you. Make sure you're taking them to a public park if you don't have either of those things, like a city park or something like that. We do want to avoid dog parks if possible, because dog parks, there's so many dogs that come in and out of there. They can carry in or track in diseases or parasites or worms or other things that you don't want your dog to come in contact with. Um, One thing I want to plug that's not on this slide is a thing called Sniff Spot that I learned about while on Capstone here. It is a essentially like an Airbnb for your dog, and you basically can pay people or rent people's yards for a day or a few hours or so, whatever, and you can take your dog there and utilize their yard. Comfortable temperatures. So obviously we don't want it to be too hot and we don't want it to be too cold, just like humans. We don't like either sides of those spectrums. Um, the temperature should not go above 85 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 4 consecutive hours. That's too hot for a dog, regardless of coat size, but especially for long haired dogs. Um, and on the opposite end, you should not let your temperature in your house fall below 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 4 consecutive hours, because that will just be too cold for the dogs. Again, especially for dogs of a certain coat type, like short-haired dogs. A devoted area to rest. So on this slide, I've provided some general examples, which I'll go over here in a second. But I do want to preface by saying that every dog has its own personality and area it likes to lay. So, it could be on a cold basement floor, for example. Like, your dog will learn where it likes to be and where it's most comfortable. But in general, it could be in a corner in a specific room. It could be in a cozy crate or dog bed. You can make crates very cozy, put dog beds in them, blankets, especially dogs who are crate trained, actually might enjoy resting in there. And it could be on your couch or your bed. One other thing, real fast, is if you do have young kids, trying to make the dog's devoted area to rest separate from your kids, or it doesn't have to be separate, but, in a nice quiet area if you have a lot of um, screaming kids. You want to make sure you have appropriate bedding for them. So here on the right side, I've kind of gave some general examples of, just a few bed styles. But overall, you want to make sure it's soft, it's durable, it fits their body size and shape. You can add an extra pillow or blanket for extra support if you want. You want to make sure that the bed has adequate cushioning, especially as the dogs age, or if you have already an elderly dog. Um, or if you have a larger breed of dog, some of them can be prone to joint issues, so that's another thing to consider. Um, and cleaning the bed regularly is very, very important. It's actually recommended by the AKC to wash your dog bed weekly if possible, to kind of keep parasites and dirt and grime and stuff out of the bed. Um, you could also consider buying a new dog bed, but again, can be quite pricey, so cleaning it is just much more cost effective. Keeping a household routine. So there's obviously several routines, you should probably try to instill in your household, but I'm just going to go over briefly two very important ones, which is walking and playtime. You want to try to walk your dog every single day. It gives them something to look forward to, but it also lets them be active and gives them exercise. And you can make alterations if needed for weather or illness or whatnot. And playing with your dog, you should also play with your dog every day, just like you should walk. Um, Fetch, tug, tossing a frisbee, um, bouncing a ball back and forth. It helps them release energy and interacts with you in a very fun way and allows you guys to bond. And if you do have other animals around or you have friends with animals, let your dog play with them because it really helps build their social and developmental skills. We also want to make sure fresh water is always available, keeps your dog hydrated, and just making sure it's fresh, keeps all the bacteria and grossness out of the water. And finally, to conclude, a tip to remember is, how you prepare your home environment for the service dog can change, and more than likely at some point will, once you get your dog home and acclimated. So please don't feel like it has to stay the same. Just because that's how you kind of prepped it to be, it doesn't have to stay that way. Change is okay. And like I said, it probably will change at some point for whatever reason. Again, I also want to say there is more detailed information to be provided on this topic as well as other topics and topics I haven't gone over after admission into the program. So that's all for this module. I've linked the Qualtrics quiz below, so you can click on that. That should work, and it should take you to the quiz. You will have to answer all the questions before you can submit it. And yeah, so I hope you all learned something today, and thank you for listening if you watched this video. If not, and you just read through the slides, totally fine. And thank you for everything, and also good luck with everything.